Hey there, Internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me this week we have Logan Wilkinson. How you doing, Logan?
I'm doing pretty good.
Doing good?
Doing all right. It is a nice little Sunday in Austin, Texas out here.
There you go. Hey, how's the weather out there for you guys? Because we're still getting some 100-degree days out here in Phoenix.
It's probably about 75 to 85, somewhere in that range. I went for a walk earlier this morning, but it was like, 8:30, so it's too early to kind of tell from there. But I would say no higher than like 85 today.
Gross. I mean, it's better than we've got, but still, 85 in middle of October is gross. So, boo. Anyway, if you like what you hear, including our talk about the weather, that old chestnut, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast everywhere you can. And if you're feeling extra generous, you can always support us over on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, just like all of our wonderful patrons. And if you do join us by supporting us on Patreon, we'll give you a little shout out here on this show. So it's been a few weeks since we've had you on the show, Logan, and I'm realizing we didn't actually go over what, if anything, you wanted to talk about. Obviously, I think our big topic will be you and I just played through the story of the Ghost of Tsushima co-op stuff that came out in the Legends reveal, or Legends kind of launch this week. But I know you also have wanted to talk about Warzone recently, so do you want to dive into that first a little bit, maybe?
Yeah, we can do that. I've been playing Call of Duty Warzone really sporadically on and off throughout the summer. And I'm in one of those phases now where I'm very much playing it. I think last week I ended up playing it 4 nights. It's just really good. It is easily the battle royale that has clicked the most for me, which in some ways maybe isn't shocking given kind of my much professed love of Call of Duty, which I almost yearly go through and play every single kind of single player campaign. Lily co-hosted a podcast about that once. And so in that ways, I think it is kind of the natural fit for a first person shooter battle royale game to really vibe with me and really click with me. And it very much does. I think it's everything I wanted from a battle royale game. I think the map is great. I think the size of it says 150 people is great. For me personally, because again, in Warzone, you can do solos, duos, trios, or quads, so up to 4 people. I think kind of the sweet spot in that game is either duos or trios. I played a lot of duos with one of my best friends back home in Missouri. And I think there's something really special to a duos and a trios game. Quads is just crazy and hectic. There's just so much happening. There's so many people. And then solos is just terrifying. You don't ever want to take a single step outside. And so I think duos and trios is a good middle ground that kind of get the best out of the game and the mechanics and the team aspect of it. But no, Warzone's great. It's that simple for me where it is the battle royale that has kind of made me really, really get it. Because I played a little bit of Apex Legends. I think it was last year now. And then I think I've played a match, maybe a fortnight. But this is the one that I've sunk considerable amount of time into and really put in hours to grind and to level up and everything else, because I'm now
Mm.
level 60s, 70s, 80s on Warzone, and all I'm doing is playing Warzone. I'm not touching any of the multiplayer. And yeah, it's great, it's fun, it's a really good way to get to talk to kind of those friends back in Missouri, because they are the people who play, Forza, Madden, FIFA, and Call of Duty, and that's what they play basically. And so it's a way to kind of connect over that with them. It's a ton of fun. It's Call of Duty. It's great. Everything plays and flows really well.
Did you spend any time? Because one of the things I'm curious about is how does Warzone, as somebody who didn't play any of them really, how does Warzone differ from Blackout, which was like the first Call of Duty attempt at the battle royale stuff, right?
So I've not played any Blackout, so I can't speak to
Okay.
that. But I mean, if I had to wager a guess, I would say it's just a more refined version of that, right? They probably took what worked in Blackout and then whatever they didn't, they kind of jettisoned. And season 6 of Warzone just started, and so they've keep adding things, right? Like the stadium in like the middle of the city, it wasn't originally open, and then eventually like they kind of blew the top off of that, and so you could like dive in there. Um, the like they added in a train now. It's like one of the big new things. So you can like hop on the train and kind of ride around the city. Um, so in terms of those changes to like Warzone itself, I can speak somewhat to, but in terms of how it compares to Blackout, I'm not really able to kind of go into that kind of depth.
Okay, so yeah, because what I remember seeing as again as an outsider was Blackout. Like in terms of the map, I'm curious like what the Warzone map is like. Because Blackout, I remember being like, oh, this is like the greatest hits of all of the Call of Duty multiplayer stuff like combined. Like I remember like, oh, there's the Nuketown portion and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So is Warzone more of like a Fortnite like evolving, just kind of like
Mm-hmm.
a map outside of the Call of Duty staples. They came up with their own thing, and that's what Warzone is. Because Warzone's also the one with the gulag, right? So if you die, you get a chance
Yes.
to fight your way back to life.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say in that vein, yeah, it's a great comparison is Fortnite, where it is one set map outside of anything else. Um, and then they'll kind of maybe add things into that map, but it is that same map every time. It is not like it's always the same map. You're not like going through like Nuketown and
Well,
then like
yeah, I mean, sorry, like
anywhere else. Yeah.
the what I meant with like Blackout was like it was pieces of all of the Call of Duty kind of like franchises or landmarks like molded into one map. So there was like a Nuketown portion of that map, and then I just don't know other Call of Duty things to speak
Yeah.
to, but it was like one map, but it was just like Fortnite has, or had like twisted towers or tilted towers or whatever, and all that, like a whole bunch of different segments of their map, so you can like point to and be like, hey, this is where we're dropping. I know Blackout had that same kind of thing, but it was like pulling pieces of old Call of Duty maps. Is Warzone just kind of its complete own thing?
Yeah, I mean, certainly in all my, I mean, it very much feels like there's nothing distinct about any of the location. Like, there's like the stadium and an airport and all that, but like, they're very much just like, this is a stadium and an airport. Nothing that I ever remember being like any sort of memorable thing from any Call of Duty campaign. Certainly not to the extent of like a Nuketown level, like iconic scene or some of the other kind of iconic locations from other Call of Duties. It very much feels, I mean, you're just kind of in a generic Soviet Union location, basically, based on kind of some of the writing and text. But otherwise from that, like it's completely kind of independent. Like
Okay.
you could very easily drop in here and not know there was a Call of Duty game based on what you were looking at. It's just kind of like this is an area that they're just kind of having you fall in.
Gotcha. Have you picked up any wins from with your crew?
Yeah, so I've won once. I got one win. And that was on trios, I believe, and then I've gotten like a ton of like top 10 because they do it based on like I think it's wins and then maybe top 5, top 10, and then one other category. But yeah, I've got multiple like top 5 and top 10s. Just the one win still. Brandon, who's the big one I'm playing with, he's got 10 wins. Because him and his girlfriend play outside of us playing, and again, he plays 4 games, and so, yeah, so they've got plenty of wins. We didn't get any, like kind of since I've started getting back into it again, but we've gotten a lot of like top 3 or 4 finishes, top 5, like the ones where basically like in the next minute the game's gonna end.
Mm-hmm.
Those kind of finishes. Yeah, so we're the fun thing about Warzone. And I think this is true of every battle royale to a degree, but in particular, I think Warzone really kind of taps into something special with it, is kind of that balancing act of how aggressive you are versus how not aggressive you are, and both in terms of in actual kind of combat situations itself, but also in terms of where you decide to kind of land on the map. And I think it really does that balance really well in terms of what kind of locations you want to drop at, what locations you don't want to drop at, how you're kind of feeling, trying different tactics of like being stealthy and kind of like hanging back and just kind of hugging the wall as it closes in and hugging the wall as it closes in, versus kind of trying to land more centrally located and locking down that house or like those few houses if you can, and seeing the different results play out on that as well.
Okay, cool. So you're having a good old time with it?
Yeah, Warzone's great. I mean, it as of right now, it'll be in my top 10 for Game of the Year at this point still. Not my top 5, but it has still, at the very least, I mean, obviously, that could very easily change in the last 2 months of the year, considering everything that's about to happen. But yeah, I mean, it's a ton of fun. It's a blast. It's a great reminder of like just how good Call of Duty is. I think it being a shooter and it being just a fun game that you want to keep playing again and again and again. And for me, Battle Royale is such a great evolution of Call of Duty's multiplayer, where I don't really have much desire to go play like team deathmatch multiplayer things, but this Battle Royale mode I think fits so perfectly what I want from a Call of Duty multiplayer in 2020.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I mean, again, just because my lack of interest in Call of Duty and on a broader scale, my general lack of interest in anything online multiplayer, but specifically like the Battle Royale stuff, just yeah, it's not anything I have any interest in really hopping into. But I'm glad you're having a good time with it.
Yeah, it's a ton of fun.
Yeah, and it definitely, like, the appeal, or one of the appeals of it is certainly always like, hey, I can hop in for a couple matches or something like that, and not, oh, I'm gonna dive into a 3-hour gaming session tonight. Mm-hmm. So yeah, if you only get like a half hour to kill, you can hop in, play some Warzone. Cool. Yeah. Before we dive into Ghost of Tsushima stuff, I just want to give a couple TV updates, I guess, on stuff I've been watching. I think I mentioned a few weeks back I'd been like I was binging through New Girl as I've been playing Hades. I wrapped up New Girl, discovering that I had never seen the final season of New Girl.
Time jump.
Yeah, time jump. It was interesting because Parks and Rec features a similar kind of like concept for their final season, and it was one of those, like, I didn't realize, because the final season of New Girl is like only 8 episodes, so it must have been like one of those like, hey, we don't want to give it a full like season like order, but we'll give you guys, you guys have been good to us. We'll give you we'll give you a farewell handful of episodes. And I didn't, and not realizing until I was on the last episode, I was like, this seems like a series finale kind of episode. And I went and looked at IMDb like in the middle of the episode. I was like, oh, it is a series finale. Okay. Up to that point, because like the final season, like I think only 8 episodes or something like that. Very much felt like it was rushing through stuff. And I think like a longer season could have maybe even had more fun with that time jump of like going back to moments in the 3-year span of time that we didn't see. But it ultimately ends up feeling much like, I think, with Parks and Rec, like, hey, they didn't really want to do a show about Schmidt and Cece having to raise a baby, so let's skip ahead to the point where that baby is, cute and precocious 3-year-old that can, I mean, like, that little kid, like, killed it in her handful of scenes that she has throughout those episodes. But yeah, like, you have the obligatory, like, oh, it's time to bring Coach back for one last episode thing. But yeah, I enjoyed it. It was a fun little send off for the show. But yeah, it just felt like very rushed, I guess, there at the end. But yeah, shout out to New Girl. And then the other little thing I've been dabbling with after
I saw the tweets.
Yeah, I've been hearing
some controversy.
I've been hearing people like sing the praises of Schitt's Creek for a while now, even before they cleaned up at the Emmys recently. It's one of those series, like, it really popped on my radar, like, maybe middle of last year, I feel like.
Yeah. Same.
And so I went to like check it out, only to find that like there were already 5 seasons of this show. I was like, oh, like where the hell did this show come from? And I went and like at the time last year, I hopped in and like watched the first episode and was like, I don't like any of these characters. I don't think this is going to be a show for me. But I, especially seeing this past week, a whole bunch of people like finishing the series with like the season 6 finales and stuff like that. And people like singing its praises and talking about how emotional it was and stuff. I was like, all right, I'll give it another shot now that I'm done with New Girl and looking for another show to, hop in and watch. And yeah, I got about halfway through the first season before I tweeted out and was like, I really just don't like this show. And Ben Bellevue, formerly of the site, kind of hopped in and was like, what in particular don't you like about it? And I mentioned to him, I was like, I'm just not interested in a show where like everybody is written and designed to be like loathsome and hated. It's just not typically my cup of tea. I don't typically like gravitate towards that humor. And as a result, like I just like 8 episodes in, I don't think I'd laughed once. Like I like all of these people. I like Eugene Levy. I like Catherine O'Hara. Well, I say I like all these people. I have always hated Chris Elliott. Everything Chris Elliott has ever done, I've just never liked the kind of character he gets typecast as, which is you really want to hate this character. This is the character you immediately want to punch in the face because of how stupid he is and how oblivious he is to his own stupidity and how like just how easily he puts you off. And I felt that when I watched like the first episode last year, and that has just become more and more the case as I've gone through. I have made it through at this point. Like I finished the first season. I'm a couple episodes into the second season, continuing to give it a little bit more of a shot, a little bit more breathing room, because the seasons are 13 episodes, I think, on this one. So it's not like as a huge investment or something as a 22 episode season. And really like I feel like the only character I regularly enjoy is the son, David Levy, Dan Levy.
I think it's Daniel. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I like him, and I think I like him because he's not a version of that character that I've seen before. But everybody else, I'm just like I just don't like spending time with these characters. And Ben in particular said that like it becomes a nicer show and a more empathetic show here in the second season. Mm-hmm. So I'm waiting to like see what that turning point is, because I think back on like the first season of The Office or the first season of Parks and Rec, where they didn't really have a good feel for what those characters were yet. But then those shows become, some of the all-time greats. And so if Schitt's Creek is able to, pull off that trick, then great. But I'm really just still waiting for that. And knowing that like Chris Elliott is in this show all the way through, I really think I'm just always going to continue to hate him, because that is what that character is designed to be. He's not going to suddenly become like not an oblivious moron. Like that's I don't see that character arc turn happening here in Schitt's Creek. So I like I'm going to give it another few episodes, maybe through the end of season 2, but if it doesn't grab me, I'm going to bounce off and start looking for something else again. Have you watched any Schitt's Creek?
I was going to say Shravia is actually a massive fan of Schitt's Creek. She loves the show. And so earlier this year, probably like January, before like really like as it was like kind of beginning, I feel like to really get huge in the States, she knew about it, and so we watched a few episodes, and I was kind of on your page with it. I didn't really love it. I think I don't even know if I kind of had like the reasons like to articulate it. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty mean show. Like a cynical, snarky show. And I didn't necessarily vibe with that. I think Dan Levy also is great. I definitely have the cast. Like I love his character and Eugene. I mean, both of them are great, Dan and Eugene. But yeah, I don't know. And like maybe again, ever since it like cleaned up and like collaborative one at the Emmys, I've been like, should I give this into a show? And I'm sure Schraub would be down in like a second. But it's that thing of like the fact that it's 13 episodes is helpful. And like again, like going back to The Office and Parks and Rec are good examples. But at least with The Office and Parks and Rec, the quote unquote like bad seasons where it's not as good, they're such short seasons, right? Like season 1 of The Office is 5 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And even like the first season of like Parks and Rec is only like 6 to 8 at the most. And so
yeah,
both
of them are
smaller.
Yeah, both of those first seasons for both those shows are 6-episode seasons.
And so
then
it's
they
just
got like
it's
retooled.
so short.
Yeah,
Especially in The Office, it was a big retooling of like arguably the main characters at worst, like the second main character with Jim, and like just kind of completely transformed that character in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And even Amy Poehler's Leslie Knope got really kind of retooled. And
Yeah.
I don't know how much I think they're going to retool it. Like I think, to Ben's point, I think the change is going to be much more subtle. Like I think it's going to be like much more of like a slow evolution of these characters over 6 seasons, and not like at the end of season 1 they were like, cool, we're going to like really retool these characters in like pretty fundamental ways at the start of season 2. That doesn't strike me as like what I'm going to expect. Like I think it's going to be like, this is kind of the show, and then over time they become more humanized and they become more like empathetic and this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I personally like how much I want to invest in that. Like maybe again, like it's a thing like maybe watching it again and getting through the kind of that first chunk of the episodes and the first season, I'll really love season 2 and 3. Like I would love to love the show, right? Like I don't, just as I'm sure you don't, like we don't wake up in the morning being like, I want to dislike this show everyone loves. That's like not how either one of us operate.
Yeah.
But I think it's definitely like a matter of the kind of humor it is.
Yeah.
Maybe not clicking necessarily with either one of us.
Yeah, like I hate the British Office because David Brent is an intentionally unlikable character who is oblivious to how much he puts people off.
By design, that's what Ricky Gervais wanted.
Exactly. And so when the American version tried to do that same thing with Steve Carell and it didn't really work and it didn't really click and they retooled him in season 2, like that made the show better for me. There are still, of course, always going to be those like very cringe moments like Scott's Tots and stuff. But those are so few and far between that like Michael Scott isn't a mean character after the first season. He's just stupid and oblivious. And even if I don't like that and I don't like a lot of the humor that is mined from that, I love the Jim and Pam relationship, and I love the back and forth between Jim and Dwight. I can have those touchstones to rely on in that show when I don't like other things that are going on in Parks and Rec. Even if I didn't like that first season of Leslie or Aziz Ansari's character basically always just dunking on Leslie, like Ron was there, and Ron was like pretty much perfectly formed like right out the gate and then just got better over time. And so in Schitt's Creek, it's like I don't like spending time with any of these characters. Like if it was the mom is one way or the sister is this thing, I'd be like, okay, but I can hang my hat on the scenes of these people. And the closest that I have there is the son, so Dan Levy's character. And again, there's another thing, like I'm not even registering their names. David, I think, is the character's name. Maybe that's why I was saying that earlier. But like him and the girl that works at the hotel, like
I like their dynamic.
I like their dynamic more than anything else on that show. But even that is more cringe for me more often than not. So like it is just like, yeah, like if I'm gonna spend 22 minutes and I'm gonna just be uncomfortable or just not be having a fun time for 22 minutes, or 20 of those 22 minutes or something like that. It just becomes like, why am I doing this apart from, being part of the conversation? But there are so many other shows out there like that I could either rewatch or hop into and try and give a shot to, that, if this one just doesn't click for me, it doesn't click for me. I'm glad so many other people like it. And I'm happy. Like, when the whole family basically took all of their Emmys this year, I was like, good for them, because I especially Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara, like, I have loved their stuff for many, many years.
Yeah.
But even there, like, because they're obviously best known from like the Christopher Guest stuff, like Best in Show and that kind of ilk, Waiting for Guffman. The mockumentary stuff that whole ensemble has done, and they're wonderful in that. And oftentimes they're playing those like cringy characters that you don't like, but that's a hour and a half, 2 hour movie, and you're done with them. And there tends to be better humor mind in those, at least for what I've seen so far. So, yeah, Schitt's Creek just not really clicking with me yet, but I'm giving it a few more episodes to see how it shakes out. See if they did kind of do a between seasons retooling there going into season 2.
What I'll also say is a final point, and this is, I guess, more about The Office too, is two things. The first is that Ricky Gervais himself has talked about how, like, British style humor, and especially the British style humor of The Office, doesn't translate like across the ocean in like America as well, and that in America you have to like your main characters. You have to kind of enjoy these people, because he said Americans view the idea of like letting people in your home, for like a comedy much differently.
Yeah, I was gonna say I would definitely say that for comedies, because like
yeah for sure
Breaking Bad in particular, or and even kind of expanding on that in Better Call Saul, like Saul Goodman and Walter White are not likable characters. They're likable performers in Bryan Cranston and what's his butt. But the characters themselves, yes, thank you. The characters themselves, you want to see them get their comeuppance. Even, I mean, obviously, going back, it takes a different connotation now. But like the like Kevin Spacey as Frank Underwood, like. It's very much tapping into that Richard III type of character.
Oh, 100%.
And so you want to see this character be charming because the other shoe's going to drop eventually, and you're going to get to see them, their downfall, and that's where the catharsis is going to come from these characters. But having that mentality in a comedy doesn't really jive for me. Yeah. Like, my favorite British comedy was actually Coupling, which I got introduced to, I don't know, like early in my college years or something like that. My sister became a huge fan of it because I think we talked about this during our Pirates episode of That D Plus show. Jack Davenport is like the romantic lead character of Coupling, and who is Norrington in the Pirates movies. And so my sister became like a huge fan of that show and introduced me to the DVDs of it. It's like 4 seasons, and it was basically like a British version of Friends, that they, much like The Office, tried to do an American version of Coupling, and it just didn't translate. But I think the British version of it, really good. I think we touched on it again. Like, it does a lot of the things that like How I Met Your Mother would end up doing in terms of like playing around with like narrative structure and stuff like that, and style of that show. But yeah, like that does still have like, those characters are a lot more likable as your main leads. They definitely screw up some of their relationship stuff, but they were by and large much more likable than Ricky Gervais, David Brent.
Yeah, and the second thing too is I watched a video essay recently, on the Office and the decline of it, air quotes, over the last 2 seasons, and it was interesting in how and like because it obviously it compared Dwight, not Dwight, I'm sorry, it compared Andy and Michael and their time as managers, and then also it went and talked about Dwight as well, and like why Michael was a successful character versus why Andy wasn't as successful as kind of the manager of the branch, and then why Dwight was so successful as a character and like the first half of the show's run and became less successful over time. And I actually thought it was really interesting in its insights of like what actually made Michael work, right? And talking about how like the joke on The Office is never that Michael is stupid. The joke is sort of that like he knows that he needs to act smarter, and it's like for people to respect him, and it's kind of these attempts, and it's the punchline is never "you're so dumb, Michael." It's always kind of his attempt to try to seem so much smarter than he is, and those attempts maybe going awry or not going awry. But it's all come out of this place of wanting to be liked, right? And this kind of this deep, I think, well of empathy he has for other people, and that he's still very much a like human character with real emotions. And then when it cut to Andy, all of the decisions he started making in like the last 2 years of the show didn't really make any sense. Whether it was like Andy and Aaron's relationship, or like his desire to be manager so badly in the first and like season 8, and then in season 9 he just like suddenly is like, I hate this job, I want to leave, like I'm gonna take a dump on like my boss's car to like get fired and then get hired back and fired again, and like his weird feud with Nelly that didn't make any sense, right? Because it talked about how when Michael is mean to someone, it's always due to like a misunderstanding. Like Michael Scott is never intentionally mean to someone after the first season, like never, like except for Toby obviously, but like he's never deliberately mean. Like that's just not who he is. And Andy very much is just like he's very rude, he's mean, he's insulting to like Nelly and some of the cast members, and like it doesn't really gel well. And I thought that was a really interesting kind of interpretation of like what made the show successful with Michael versus what didn't make it successful, and kind of transitioned to the Andy Bernard kind of managerial stint. But that's about a whole other. It also had like a really cool, I thought, glimpse at like why Dwight over time became less successful as a character.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a non sequitur technically. But it's like the Too Long Didn't Read version of like Dwight is actually kind of the opposite. Is that like as Dwight began to like understand people's emotions better, and like start pranking people back, the video essay kind of argued like that made him less successful as a character. It was actually when kind of those earlier seasons where he was just kind of like this more socially awkward, goofy person, was actually like the better version of Dwight, when he was kind of much more loyal to Michael, and then over time where he kind of became more rude to Michael in instances that character was actually not as successful. Yeah. Again, it was an interesting. It was like 30-minute long, but it was a really interesting video of like agreeing with certain points and not agreeing with others, but of like kind of what led to The Office kind of declining.
Yeah, no, those are like the fascinating character like or studies and stuff, especially with kind of those breakout characters and how they perform over time. Because like I was thinking, especially wrapping up New Girl, I found myself thinking that Schitt and Cece is like the much better version of the Barney Robin relationship from How I Met Your Mother.
God, preach it, Trevor.
Because Schmidt is very much like a Barney Stinson type of character. He was, the comic relief side character that ends up kind of breaking out a little bit within the show. I don't think he ever broke out to the levels that Barney does, because Neil Patrick Harris is just phenomenal and really shot that to the moon. But and you have a central kind of core of Zooey Deschanel and Jake Johnson being more fun and likable than maybe Ted is in his kind of journey on that show. But like the whole dynamic between Barney and Robin that ends up happening is trying to take these characters and kind of bring them together. And Schmidt and Cece have a much more prolonged will they won't they kind of thing throughout, but then grow up and actually mature, as opposed to How I Met Your Mother, where they grow to a point and you think they're going to grow and mature, and then they pull out the rug from under you after a season of trying to build up their wedding. and then like they immediately are like divorced, 20 minutes later or something like that.
The final episode of the final look, this could be a whole at some point we have to actually do it 'cause we've talked so much shit about it, but like how I Met Your Mother ended is it's so unfathomably bad. Like it's that thing of like, look, we are obviously not, we haven't had a like 9-year long television show. I'm aware of that, but we are people who are like, critics in some capacity, and I can tell you it's just the decisions made there are so inexplicable. And I think the comparison of like Schmidt and Cece being the correct way to do a Barney Robin storyline is so apt, because like you can just see the contrast so well where like they actually committed to it, right? Because like I don't know if when New Girl started, in their heads they were like, we're gonna have Schmidt and Cece get together and this will make sense. Maybe after like the first few episodes they saw how good the actors' chemistry was and they kind of started to change things, and like the writers had really good ideas for that and they kind of kept going in that direction or not. But it felt much more like a natural development. Whereas Barney and Robin, there was always this kind of thing, I feel like, where the writers and the showrunners and that, they had the idea they had for what they wanted the show to be and how they wanted it to end in the first season, and they could just never let go of that idea over 9 years. Even if it didn't make sense any longer, they just couldn't let it go. So that by the time you watch the last episode of that show, it literally doesn't fit in the universe they've created in that show. Like, it doesn't fit in the world they've made any longer. Especially after season 9, where it's an entire season in that wedding, and then you get to the last episode and it's like, none of that mattered. It like felt, even though they hadn't, it felt like they'd filmed the last episode years in advance.
Oh, they filmed parts of it because they had the kids, that's absolutely they locked into that in season 2.
They never allowed themselves to change it, and it's such a shame, because if they had let Barney and Robin be happily married, if they let Ted and the mother have their relationship, because what ends up happening is with the way they end Barney and Robin's relationship, it like unravels so much of like all of the other characters' growth as well. Like there's such a ripple effect on that, and like to the point where the entire premise of the show is cheapened by their desire to have it be Robin still. Like it like literally wipes. It's like, well, what is the point? Like this entire show suddenly becomes like, what is the point of this? Like, and you getting Robin and like forcing her and Ted to be together, I would argue you for sure you ruin all of Barney's character's growth. You just like wipe it out in like an episode, and it's incredible to watch. But even like Robin's, you wipe so much of her growth out. Even Ted, like you like in the like you literally take him back to where he was at the first episode and like how it ended, and it's like this isn't. I don't know. Like so much of the show as it went on was like Ted had to be in the right place to be the mother. He had to like grow and be like the right kind of person. He had to experience all this stuff to be the person that could be with the mother. And then the show ends and it's like, well, not really, because we're going to wipe it all away. It's just that he can be with Robin. So we're going to hurt 2 other characters on the show too. And it's like, it's such a non-natural development for all these characters. Whereas with New Girl, yeah, like Schmidt and Cece's relationship felt so good, and it felt so natural, and it worked so well, and it flowed so well, right? To where like by the end of that, I was like, yes, this feels like the destination that these 2 characters would go on in a very natural way, right? Like the other arc I can really think of that is sort of like Barney. I'll word it like this: Barney and Robin's dynamic and Robin and Ted's is much more reminiscent of like old school like 70s and 80s style show where it's like a will they won't they and nothing else matters, and it feels much more like a Ross and Rachel, but a worse version of that, and a worse version of like Ted Danson's characters and everyone on Cheers. And it's like all of the like bad versions of this will they won't they thing, because all of the ways they kept saying like, oh, Robin's not the mother, Robin's not like, I'd have been way more content, still not happy because it still would have been bullshit, but like way more content at least if they just been like, and Robin's the mother. But the fact that they tried, like, it's just like the ultimate example I can see in a TV show of like, they tried to have their cake and eat it too. They tried to be too smart, and she'd be like, oh, she's not the mother, but he ends up with her. And it's like, no, like, you just wanted to have this thing in your head that you had a decade ago and keep it, even though it didn't make sense any longer. And yeah, like, I think New Girl's ending is so much better because it felt like a natural development of these characters, and even The Office, like their ending felt like so much more of a natural conclusion of these characters. Like they let Michael Scott leave, and he left in a very natural way, and how Jim and Pam's arc on that show ends, I think, is a much more natural development of how things kind of developed over time, and it never felt like these characters and How I Met Your Mother were allowed to kind of naturally go where they should have gone, and it kind of kept we had to keep doing this weird cycle where like Ted be like, I'm done with Robin, and then like the next season he'd like relapse again for like at least 5 of the seasons basically, and it's just like, this is, what are we doing? Like, this is not how a TV show should run. And again, I don't mean that in like an insult way. I mean just in like, this is not good TV by the end because you've forced yourself into like only being able to do like this one thing. And yeah, and then my final thing is that like How I Met Your Mother, I would also say, especially in the context of like New Girl, How I Met Your Mother is, I would also argue, is like a classic example of like, this is a TV show that also just was on the air for too long.
Yeah. I mean, I would
also say.
I would say like How I Met Your Mother, especially in the grand scheme of thing, has a lot of great like one-off episodes.
And, God, absolutely.
And incredible number of like great character moments.
Yes.
But yeah, the Robin ending could have probably worked up through maybe season 4, but past that point, once you got like once you got past like the Stella arc with Sarah Chalke in there, and kind of like continued developing those characters and tweaking them and all that stuff, the characters outgrew where that show was in those first seasons. And then on top of that, like one of the things that you didn't really touch on, but I think is absolutely instrumental, is nobody could have imagined how blown away everybody was going to be by Kristen Milotti as the mother, especially after 8 seasons of build-up. Like, how is anybody going to like live up to the expectations we have for this character? And she did like flawlessly and effortlessly. And for many, many people, that was also like her first breakout thing for people.
That was the first thing I ever saw her in.
And like I had only known her prior to that from the musical Once, the original soundtrack of that musical. And I knew from that she like was amazing in that role and could do that voice. But yeah, like she blew everybody away in How I Met Your Mother, like stepping into that, very intimidating role, and just crushing it. And so yeah, like when, obviously we've already like gone into spoilers for How I Met Your Mother, but when you end that show and like finally Ted meets the mother and you have this like great like catharsis, like what you really then want is like maybe even a season of the mother with like everybody integrated into the show. It defeats the concept of the name of the show. And that's another place where like that problem lies. But the fact that you have them meet and then like in the finale, it's like, okay, and we had a great time together. We're not going to spend any time really going over, our memories as a family, because this was the story of how I met her, not the story of what we did after we met and how you kids came along and all that stuff. And so then when she is killed off, and we don't even get like that satisfying ending until they reintroduce that as like an alternate ending to the series on like DVD or whatever. And it does become all of a setup for that payoff, that quote unquote payoff of like the kids basically saying like, Mom was barely in that story, Dad. Like this was clearly a story about how much you love Aunt Robin, which also, its own like otherworldly like nonsense. But yeah, it just like the mother ended up being everything like anybody wanted her to be. So then to brush her aside in favor of this decision they made years before, like that's really like I probably wouldn't have even seen the animosity around the ending of How I Met Your Mother if we hadn't had a whole season with the mother. Like if it had really just been like this character, like if they had completely stunt cast it and like brought in, some big name
Jennifer
star
as
the mother in the final episode, like that would have been dumb, but it would have then helped excuse the idea of going off to be with Robin. Like, so maybe the Robin ending would have even still worked as late as like season 8, I think was the second to last season. But yeah, after a season with this great character, especially a season built up around a stupid wedding weekend, like it just felt like a betrayal to like that character that you'd spent 8 seasons building up, 9 seasons building up, to then just sweep under the rug for this other thing. Yeah, it was frustrating, and I've come to like I was much more like a defender of the decision at the time. Like I was like, I mean, these creators, it's their show, and I kind of like there is an aspect of me that applauds that they had this idea and prepared for it back in season 2 so they could shoot that ending with the kids before they completely outgrew the story that their dad is telling. But yeah, the fact that they didn't like ever circle back and reevaluate that and say, hey, this is the extra that we could put on the DVD. Like, this is the alternate ending that we could, tout and brag and tell people, like, we did have an idea, back here. Yeah. Here's the footage that we shot. But yeah, they just didn't ever like it, or if they did second guess it, they didn't second guess it enough and make the right call away from it. They stuck to their guns, which as creators, that's certainly their right. Yeah. But clearly the audience kind of did not stand with them on that front. But anyway,
I just want to
there's our sitcom corner. Yeah.
I had 2 quick things on How Much Mother that I also think play into it, which is, and I guess this you could argue is like a matter of like personal preference, but I think it's largely true among the audience, which is that Barney and Robin's chemistry is just better than Ted and Robin's, right? Like that's also the thing. Like I think Neil Patrick Harris and Colby Smolder's chemistry is just better than hers and Josh Radnor's. Like they work so well together, and I think they have such good dynamic. Even more so after the mother like gets involved, and it's like, man, even in just the one scene she's in with Josh Radnor, the mother and his chemistry is so good, and it's like, man, yeah, like this makes sense. It's like these are the natural parents. And then the other quick point I would say too is you kind of touched on it briefly, which is that the way that they structured the final episode, I think, is even just so terribly bad in terms of like trying to get us to the point of like Robin and Ted, because that last 5 minutes is such a whirlwind of shit happening, because like you finally get Ted meeting the mother. Their meetup is so great. It's so good. Like everything is perfect. And then literally the very next scene after they meet is her being killed off. Like there's not a breath in between. It's just like, here's the mother. They met. Now she's on her hospital bed. She's dying. Now he's with Robin. And it's like, what? Like, how could you possibly not think to like have any sort of like space in between it? And I think again, it just goes back to the idea of like, they had this idea of what they wanted to do, and they didn't really think necessarily as much, I think, pretty clearly on how they were going to get there. And so, like, when you get there, it's just like, this is such a whirlwind of emotions. And, like, my final thought is that, like, my reaction was not like yours. My reaction was much more immediate and much more visceral, just being like, this is, like, because going into the episode, there were, like, rumors, obviously, of, like, the mom's going to die, Ted's gonna end up with Robin, but I was always like, there's literally not a chance. Like, that would be just insane if they did that. And so to get there, and I was already worried in the beginning when like Barney and Robin like broke up. I was like, this is a weird, like, I was like, this is like a bizarre choice. Like, I don't really understand that at all. And then get into that, and like Ted and like the mother meet, and it's like, all right, cool, but like this is the ending, and it's awesome. And then like it cuts to the next shot, she's dead, and I'm like, what? And then like. And, like, I couldn't find myself being like, this is not right. And then, like, it cuts to him and Robin. And, like, I literally, well, I'll never forget it. Like, I was sitting on my couch back in Missouri, and, like, the episode ends, and I literally, like, sat up and had to walk outside and be like, I just need a minute right now. Because, like, what was that? Like, in my wildest ideas of, like, how badly this could go, it wasn't even like that. It was like, this is, like, everything I could have possibly, like, nightmare scenarioed out. This is, like, it. Like, I actually am kind of on the opposite side where it's like, I think the last episode of How I Met Your Mother is like the worst series finale I've ever seen. But both, not even because like the episode itself is bad, although I would argue it is and poorly structured and written, but just because of like the ramifications of like what it does retroactively to everything. I just can't. Yeah, like I definitely like. There's something to be said, I guess, for like sticking to your vision and going through it all the way to the end. But I just can't defend the idea of like clearly not seeing everything around you to be like, this is not how this character is. Like, we've naturally progressed beyond this. Like, I'm much more in the line of like, yeah, after season 4, it doesn't make sense. Because even by season 8, I just think they've invested so much capital in Barney and Robin, and so much capital, like, doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on the fact that, like, Robin is not the mother. Like, it is just... I think my issue with the finale of How Much Mother is that, like, it's just so smug and arrogant. Like, it just rubs me the wrong way so much. Of like, they just couldn't, like, see the obvious thing. And they're just like, we're going to stick to our thing, everyone else be damned. And to their credit, to be fair, they did that. And I think the ramifications is that, like, the audience very much had a reaction. And, like, and not in a way of, like, Seinfeld where it's like, that last episode sucks on Seinfeld. But, like, the show itself is, like, it's a show about nothing. It's chill. It's fine. How Much Your Mother was very much, like, they were, like, so proud of the fact, like, this is, like, a cool, evolving 9-year story. And, like, it's all about the story. Like, that's, like, the whole thing. And then to get that, it's, like, man, this is one where, like, the ending does matter a little bit more. And, like, I don't know.
I mean, yeah.
But anyway.
The ending episode, as you kind of, like, made me realize, like, it starts out completely undoing...
Bad.
It starts out by completely undoing all of the work of that final season that you built up to this wedding that is immediately undone. And then it ends by undoing all of the work of the entire rest of the show. It's like it's
That's
not,
what I'm trying to say.
It's
like,
not
it's
content to undo just one season. It goes, full tilt into like, haha, yeah, we strung you all along. It was a joke all along.
That's what it feels like. It feels like it's like I almost feel like they thought that people would be like, "Oh, that's really funny." Like they got us, but like people don't have that reaction when the joke lasts for 9 years. When the joke is for that long, people have a very different reaction to "got you," and that's why I said like, even though I know it wasn't like it. I know the episode wasn't filmed early, but like I almost would not be shocked if I heard like that whole script was not updated that much from what it was 8 years ago, right? Like, because like that script is just so like you step in. Like, I don't know if anybody's done it recently, but like watch the next to last episode of How I Met Your Mother and then watch the last one. It is such strong whiplash. Like these characters are like 8-year-old versions of themselves suddenly, and it's like this is such a bizarre it is a weird Twilight Zone you step into there. It is at what I can say is that like they will now be shown in writing classes of like what not to do to end an episode in terms of like how you want to get there. But this wasn't even the main topic of the show.
Yeah. No, we just kind of completely went off into a sitcom tangent. So yeah, let's dive back over into what we actually spent the last few hours of our day sitting down with. Ghost of Tsushima brought their Legends update out this week. Which is the kind of the co-op campaign, I guess. There's like a story mode, which we've played through, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about. There's survival mode, which is basically like a horde mode kind of thing, and then there's a raid, which we haven't really touched on at all. But yeah, what are your kind of your initial impressions there? Obviously, we haven't had you on the show recently, but like Ghost is and has been in the running for your game of the year kind of this year. It's absolutely really hooked for you, really clicked for you. So what do you think of our time with the Ghost story mode?
Yeah, I mean, I would say one of the best things that I'll say about Legends is that I had zero intent to originally beat the entire thing in one go. And then it was like, it's just such a fun loop, I think. And also just like playing games on a weekend with, a friend is always like a great time. But like, I mean, if you like Ghost, you're going to like this. I mean, it's that same combat loop. One of the things that I really started to kind of touch on later on as we played is that like, I love how different each kind of like act, for lack of better words,
Yeah.
like visual look is. Like some of them are really cool. Not every. I'm not as like in love with every act, with every enemy type. I don't know if I'll ever really love the ghost.
Yeah.
There's some a little bit of like bullshittery with him, but it's a ton of fun. It's really, I think, well paced. Like it's a perfect length, I think. Like that's exactly almost like the length I would want that to be, and it's split up in a way that is very easy and kind of bite sized. Like none of them were longer than like 25 minutes. Even the one that we like really struggled on at the end, we still got done in like 25 or so minutes, I think.
Yeah.
So they're all kind of bite sized lengths, kind of each little like section thing you're going through, like three acts, three chapters
really
each.
reminded me, especially halfway through, I would say is when I really started getting the vibes of the Titanfall 2 campaign, where it was like every mission in this, and there's 9, I think there were 9 kind of story missions, and it's like everyone is approaching a new idea, much like every level of Titanfall basically was like, here's an idea that we're throwing at the wall amidst the this mech combat that you're going to be doing, and so like you have early levels there where it's like, okay, you're going to have a red or like an orange, you're going to have orange guys, you're going to have blue guys, you're going to have green guys, and you can only really do good damage against them when you take, the same colored boon or something like that on the map. Otherwise, you're going to have a hard time. One of those, what the second level was basically like, hey, the first mission, you have 2 enemies that are going to be tethered together. So if you don't kill them both quickly enough, like one of them will revive the other. And so you and I basically have to kind of like tag team and like assassinate them at the same time. The second level, you have it introduces this character that can basically heal up anybody within their aura. So you have to take out that person first, because otherwise if you're trying to hack and slash the grunt, they're regenerating health so quickly that like it took both of us hacking and slashing at a guy to do enough damage to defeat the regenerated health kind of thing. So like each level basically introduced a new idea, and then you did it for a 3-act structure of that level, and then you were done and you went on to the next story. And so yeah, that like I just innately think of Titanfall when I think of that kind of structure. And I remember like at the time people were like, Titanfall's like Mega Man, where it's like every level is that idea. And so I guess it's that same kind of thing. Like if you think of it as like each mission is like a Mega Man level, you've got like the theme of that level leading up to a boss in that level, or a boss fight, or an enemy encounter that's going to be like the pinnacle of that style. So yeah, like I really liked it. I was hoping then by the time we got to the end that there would be something that would like bring them all together, and we'd have
the end is like one of the weirder ones.
Yeah, like the ending is probably just the most normal Ghost-ish of it, in that it's just like it's taking on the castles at the end of Act 1 or the end of Act 2 in the main game kind of thing. It's that like wave through the fortress kind of mission, and I would have rather seen like, hey, let's bring back those twin enemies, and so for this chunk of the level you have to kill those guys, and then for this chunk you have to equip the right thing to take out or to cancel out somebody's attunement or something like that.
I still think there should have been a big boss at the end. I mean, like spoiler somewhat, but like it's interesting how they kind of forego that option.
Yeah, I mean it. Like I'm of two minds on that. Like if it had been a big boss, I fear that it would have been that like Batman Arkham Asylum kind of thing of like, this isn't really what this game is about. It is about fighting off waves of enemies, rather than like one big bad enemy that's going to do a ton of damage. And I would say that like the one that we struggled with was the mission before that kind of had that vibe to it, that was like a big boss that had a few minions around him. So it maybe even with that in mind, like the end thing is maybe more of a denouement, and it's kind of like, hey, let's like clean it, like close it out with a more standard fare of fighting. But yeah, I would have liked something that kind of like tied it all together, and maybe that's what the raid does, or maybe that's what
Yeah, that's true.
the harder level survival modes do. Because yeah, we hopped in, apart from the story co-op there, we hopped in basically when we reached the minimum level threshold needed or recommended for the survival thing. We hopped in and did that, survived 11 rounds, I think,
We
into
died
the
on
12th
round
round.
12. Yeah.
Yeah, out of 15, and those are structured like kind of 4 waves and then a boss wave and then 4 waves and a boss wave. So basically boss wave every 5, and it was like it's basically like a control point kind of thing with like the enemies coming into 3 different points on the map, and you kind of have to go and fight them off. We were paired up with a couple of randos via the matchmaking, so it's because that's like the co-op is 2-player, the matchmaking is or the survival is 4-player, up to 4-player, and then the raid is up to 4-player. So
Ton of fun. I had a ton of
Yeah.
fun with survival. I would easily do that. I'm looking forward to doing survival stuff again. Especially now that we've
Yeah.
beaten the story mode, so it should be stronger. Like that was a ton of fun. I love those kind of modes anyway. And so there it looks like there were like 4 or 5 different like survival maps.
yeah,
To kind of explore as well.
yeah. I think there's a ton of replayability here. We played
yeah.
through everything at the bronze level, which is basically like, hey, if you just hop into this game, you can just like play through all this stuff, and then and you have like unlimited continues. So if if everybody dies, you respawn. I think when you get into the silver tier, where it's like, hey, here's your higher recommended level, you're gonna get better gear out of that, but it's also gonna be certainly more of a challenge. And then there's also like you can play one of the 4 classes. So there's the samurai class, there's the hunter class, there's the assassin, and there's the ronin. I was playing as the hunter, which is more like the archer ranged kind of focus, and you were playing as the assassin. And like just based on like our time with it, the assassin's ultimate ability is like so overpowered.
It's lit. It's so great.
Because you're able to just kind of like slash through 5 guys, a la the ghost mode of the main campaign, I think. Versus my ultimate ability as the hunter was, I can do 3 lethal arrow shots at once. And that's how yours started out, was 3 kills at once. But yours almost immediately leveled up to you can kill up to 5 guys at once. But yours weren't like hard and fast kills. So if it was a boss enemy, it was going to take down a lot of damage, but it wasn't going to automatically kill them. I don't know if the arrow thing that I had would, because I part of it was also I always just forgot to like use it as much as I should have. Until some of those final fights.
Yeah, one thing I'll say about my special too is part of what makes it so like incredibly just powerful is not just basically for anybody other than like actual like boss kind of people, it's like instant kill, but it's the fact that like because those basically just like pop up like square to get to like the next enemy, and that guy can be like across the map and it'll just like teleport you there. Like that's also what makes it, I think, so OP, that like you can just like teleport like all over the map if there's no one close by to you to get to the next kill. So you can really just like wreak havoc on a camp very quickly. Or in one case, even though like the hostage ended up dying, like you like ran into a room with a hostage and I was just like teleported over even though I was like a mile away and like wiped out 3 of the guys. And again, we didn't technically still save the hostage, but like basically if it'd have been an extra like 3 seconds we would have. Like it's very powerful, more like what you can do and how fast you can kind of traverse the map in that special.
Yeah. So yeah, I like it's one of those, I again, for my personal preference, like I'll hop in to see. Oh, also I'm definitely gonna wait until this thing gets patched before I go back to it, because I have been encountering it's like Logan didn't deal with this at all, but
Nope.
Since the patch, even if I'm playing single player Ghost of Tsushima, every few minutes I get a pop up that basically pulls me out of the game saying like, hey, there's a server issue, we can't connect to the PlayStation Network. But I'm able to just kind of like click OK to like it's one of those prompts that's like, here are your suggested actions, or you can just hit OK and like go back to the game. And like I can hit OK and go right back into the game. I only got like actually booted once in our time in our few hours playing through the co-op thing.
5 hours. Roughly.
And but yeah, it like every few minutes this thing was popping up, and it pops up in the middle of combat, and so I'm pushing the buttons to hit somebody or to jump away, and the thing pops up. So instead of jumping, I'm now going into suggestion actions, and I have to now like go out of another menu to get back to the game, and while things are attacking me and killing me and stuff. And it was just incredibly infuriating, and so like it's something that Sucker Punch is apparently aware of, and they're working on a patch for it. But yeah, it's just like I don't like, this is the worst bug I've ever really faced on that level, apart from stuff that just like hard crashes your game. Like the fact that this thing just pops up, including in the single player stuff, just every few minutes with this little error thing was incredibly infuriating, and like I don't know how many times we would be in the middle of a fight or something, and I'd just be like, "God damn server thing, leave me alone," over our call. So yeah, so once that gets patched and resolved, I might go back and visit this game to see if like obviously if you're available, we can hop in and maybe play some more. But like I'm curious to see what it's like if you're playing single player, if you can do it with like AI on the story mode stuff, and just see what that kind of feels like. Because like it's the kind of thing, like if I don't ever play this again, I'm not gonna feel like I'm missing out on anything. But it would be curious to kind of see what some of those other things are.
I'm curious about the raids too.
Yeah, with the raid in particular would be something that might be fun to get Cameron and maybe a fourth to hop in and see what that whole thing feels like, as well as just kind of the doing a survival with 4 people on comms and being able to coordinate, because yeah, we obviously weren't able to really chat with the other 2 people we were playing with on that. So I imagine they were a pair and we were a pair. So we were probably coordinating apart, with each other, but not like with the whole group. But also in that horde mode, you can like you acquire kind of like spirit energy throughout the thing, and then you can use that spirit energy to buy like little upgrades, like regenerating health and stuff. I bought a spirit bear that came in and just wrecked shop for a wave or 2. That was cool. But yeah, so we played as the hunter and assassin, and then like after you rank up to like rank 8 in your time, you can unlock another character, and then eventually, like if you play the game enough, you can unlock all 4. And so you can explore all of them. Like they all have the basic moves of Jin, and it comes down to like what there's like a special ability that everybody has, and then there's like the ultimate ability that is like uses 3 resolve to slash through a whole bunch of enemies or shoot multiple arrows. Like your special ability was like temporary invisibility, which works for the assassin. Mine was like a stun arrow, basically, that can kind of ding everybody and kind of stagger them for a little bit. And then eventually, when we were able to unlock our second party, like you unlocked the samurai and I unlocked the Ronin, I think. But we didn't really play with them at all. But yeah, and there's a cool little loot grind to it, in that like every mission in the story mode, at least, that we were doing, we were unlocking new gear that was like powering us up, a la like a Destiny or an Avengers. Complete with like green and blue items that we were getting, and you get like your special ninja or samurai weapons. Like we started out with the kunai, and eventually we both got very excited once we got to sticky bombs and being able to like just throw those at enemies and take out a trio of people all in one go. And then the healing gourd also came in handy as kind of one of the special things, because it was like, hey, if you aren't near a drum because you can't use resolve to just heal yourself in this one. That's kind of the trade-off from the single player. So you have to go to like drums on the map that you can like hit, and they'll create like a little regeneration pool for a little bit there. but they're like one-time use things, and so if like Logan hits a drum and I'm on the other side of the map, I'm not going to get any kind of health boost from that or anything. But if you have a healing gourd equipped like that, you can use, and then it has a cooldown thing, and then you can use it again if you need. So that's like another way to go. Yeah, I had a good time with it.
Yeah, I mean, I had a ton of fun. Again, I enjoyed it a ton. I mean, again, I don't think you play a game for 5 hours on a Sunday if you don't like some of it. So I had a ton of fun. I'm very much looking forward to doing more survival stuff and looking what the raids are. And then even like going through some of the story stuff again, like on that silver difficulty now. I'll be curious, but I mean, I still have to finish the main game. So like you said, like outside of doing like syncing up and playing through this again, I won't get to it for a little bit because I have the actual game to still finish. But yeah, it's very fun. I mean, Ghost is great. Again, like Ghost is probably my game of the year so far this year. It's a ton of fun, and so if you like Ghost, I would say you're gonna like this, and possibly like really like it for some of the survival and raid stuff that we've played significantly less of.
Yeah, and one of the things I do also want to give a shout out to, because of how we were playing it, I didn't have like the volume up too crazy, but the person who's kind of narrating the legend stuff is a new character named Gyozen, who is voiced by Greg Baldwin, who, for fans of Avatar: The Last Airbender, is the actor that took over the role of Uncle Iroh when the original voice actor for that role passed during the final season, I think. So it very much like, and you basically hear Uncle Iroh immediately if you're familiar with Avatar. So that was a cool little nod to, I guess, kind of that character and kind of his vibe, because he was cool. He kind of tells the story as you go through and play, and just kind of like there's like each of the story mode missions is basically like 3 waves. You go through, you do some stuff, and then you go into a portal that has basically like a bridge into the next level where you're going to get a little bit more of that story from Gyozen to kind of carry you into the next thing. And so you basically go through that 2 of those portals in every map, where he's kind of filling you in on the story of this particular, mythology or something like that. It was cool. So yeah, shout out to Ghost of Tsushima Legends. And just, again, it being like free content that I don't think any of us were really expecting when we picked up the game back at launch. So it's cool that Sucker Punch just kind of like added this in. I wish it didn't have the buggy problems that it had for me.
Sure,
but,
yeah.
Shit happens. Whatever. They'll fix it. I hope. So yeah, shout out to Ghost. Just more reasons to enjoy that game, I guess, for people, and to give it more replayability. Because on the flip side, I appreciated that it had a tutorial to hop into before we started playing together, because the tutorial did a better job of reintroducing the controls and the buttons and everything for me, who hasn't played Ghost in a couple months, compared to what I tried to do yesterday. Was I hopped into like New Game Plus, which just drops you right back in the beginning of the game with like all your stuff from the first game, and I immediately got killed in like my first standoff because I didn't remember like what buttons did what, and I didn't remember how to parry and dodge and all that stuff. So I was not having a great time, especially then when 2 minutes in I'm getting these like pop-ups saying like, hey, you're not connected to this and to the PlayStation Network. I'm like, why the fuck do I need to be connected to the PlayStation Network for this? I'm playing the single player. Leave me alone. So it made me wish that there was like an option to turn tutorial things back on for New Game Plus. But I appreciated that the co-op mode did have a tutorial to reintroduce all those things. So yeah, good times with Ghost today. Anything else you wanted to touch on or go over before we wrap up here, Logan?
I think Ghost is great. That's my wrap up. Just in general, everybody play Ghost if you haven't. It's great. But by the likes of it being like one of the most completed games ever on PlayStation, it seems like a lot of you have. But play it if you haven't.
Yeah,
it's real good.
Good times in Ghost. All right, so that's going to do it for this week's episode of That Nerdy Site Show. Thank you for joining me, Logan. You can follow Logan at Lefty Logie. Anything you want to give a shout out to?
I will give a shout out to me and Trevor's episode of That D Plus Show going over Hocus Pocus, because Hocus Pocus is real good, as some of you commented on Twitter after the fact. Movie's real popular, apparently. Who knew? Look forward to me and Trevor doing more Halloween-themed D Plus episodes soon. I would expect Halloween Town at the very least, and Addams Family as well, possibly. We'll see.
I don't know if Addams Family is on Disney Plus.
D Plus, but Halloween Town is, and we'll definitely be doing that. I can assure you of that. Don't worry. It's weird. I saw somebody today. It was either a tweet or like an actual article talking about how like Halloween Town is a better Halloween movie than Hocus Pocus.
Yeah, I think Cameron Hawkins like retweeted somebody basically, and was like, "Yeah, I agree."
We'll see if that's true. But Hocus Pocus is great. That's all I know. That movie held up so well, as I kind of said in my tweet. So yeah, everybody go listen to that episode, because me and Trevor had a ton of fun just talking about how good that movie still is.
Yeah. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey, and I second that. Yeah, go check out the Hocus Pocus episode of That D Plus Show from this last Friday. It was fun revisiting that kind of staple from our childhoods. That's what a lot of D Plus Show is, especially like on the early episodes of it, where it was like, hey, let's revisit all of these like Disney Channel original movies from our childhood. This wasn't a Disney Channel original movie, and as a result, it's way better than a lot of those other like very nostalgic bumps that we tackled early on in the show. Like this one was, a solid movie of its time, and certainly I think still holds up pretty well. So yeah, go check out our extended thoughts on Hocus Pocus on That D Plus Show. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site and check out thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please rate, review, like, and subscribe, and maybe even consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, where every patron gets early access to a monthly bonus episode of this very show, where, of course, we've talked about it the last few weeks. This month's early access episode is our epic 4.5-hour rundown of the best PlayStation 4 exclusives via the PS I Love You bracket that Kind of Funny did a couple months back now at this point. So you can go check that out. Certainly worth $1, and a lot of good fun conversation on that episode as well. But if you can't support us, no worries. That'll be going up live here at the end of the month as a Halloween treat to everybody in advance of the new consoles launching next month. So that's going to do it. Thank you again for listening. Thank you, Logan, for joining me. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.